Hello and welcome, Miami Hurricanes fans. This is Brian Smith, publisher at All Hurricanes. And today I'm going to preview the North Carolina State Wolfpack, how they would match up with Miami, some of the concerns I have, and their overall team for the year 2023. Here's the order and kind of the juxtaposition to each thing that I'm going to go over. Number one, just kind of their team, my thoughts, Dave Doeren, the head coach, his style. Then we're going to move on, talk a little bit about the offense, which has many question marks, but it does have Brennan Armstrong coming in, coach a day. He's a very good offensive mind. He's been at BYU in many places. And they're going to be a really good defensive team again, but is it going to be as good as it's been? They lost a couple key linebackers, etc. We'll get into that. We'll also talk a little bit about their schedule overall, what they've done the last few years. I'm going to feature Miami, Florida State, Clemson, and North Carolina, how you do in bigger games. You can lose a game every now and then to these teams, but can you consistently compete? That's why we're going to talk about that. How they match up with Miami, though, is kind of the end of it. All that data together, a few thoughts, and then just kind of a prediction on what's going on with North Carolina State. This is a team that can compete with anybody in a given year. They've proven that for years. Dave Doeren's a good head coach, etc. So out of the series that I'm going to be doing in the Atlantic Coast Conference, this might be the most interesting one, along with Louisville. And Louisville, it's because of their schedule. Much like NC State, as you will see, when you play teams and who you miss is a very big part of projecting a team's win-loss record. So first off, Dave Doeren, defensive-minded coach. He came over after he was the head coach at Northern Illinois, and he was very good. Looking at Dave's record, I mean, he's 72-54. At NC State, nothing great. Basically, that says 7-5. You're like, that's not all that great. It's not been a program that's dominated at any point in its history, like dominated. They've always been a team that just can't quite get over the hump. There's a lot of teams in Carolina. There are 5 Power 5 teams or 4 Power 5 teams and 1 in East Carolina that's kind of close to that. Plus, you have App State. There's just a lot of people pulling from the talent, which eats them up. And then there's also the point that it's considered a basketball school by many. It probably doesn't help. So, but their fan base is rabid and whatnot. So, I don't think you're going to consider him anything other than a defensive-minded guy. But it is intriguing that he brought over a day. He was at NC State, at Virginia when Brennan Armstrong was there and just did very well. He's in the past, he served 3 different stints at Brigham Young. He is a passing guy, and he understands how to get the ball vertical. If you look at coaches around the country, there's a million different ways to throw the football, but the teams that can throw the ball down the field and eliminate having to grind through, especially that red zone, they're going to have benefits. And this is a guy that's kind of figured that out. Hopefully for them, Brennan Armstrong's career will be resurrected a little bit because last year he was just flat bad. But he was at Virginia without a day because he'd went up to Syracuse. So we'll see. Now the question becomes, can Brennan Armstrong take that next step in terms of knowing when to turn around and hand off and when not to? But here's the stat, and I've said this recently in another podcast I did on Miami. Jordan Houston did not score a rushing touchdown last year, although he ran for over 500 yards, and I believe it was 134 carries. Didn't have a rushing score. Their second leading rusher had 3 touchdowns, and no other running back had any. They must run the ball better. They must. But one of the reasons they struggled is their wide receiver corps is pedestrian at best. And if you really think about the ability to hit the big plays, if they ever needed a coach to come in like Anae, boy, they hit it there. But who's going to be the deep threat? Who's going to be the guy that's the big-bodied receiver? Like when he was at Virginia, Brennan Armstrong had really talented players to throw the football to. Not just good, really talented. So I'm kind of curious to see what he can do with a less talented group, maybe a group that's not necessarily dominant up front, but they weren't at Virginia either. But he's probably going to be a little more balanced and checking down and hitting the 7-yard pass instead of the 25-yard deep in cut where the guy gets another 5 or 10 with his talent after the catch. So we'll see about that. And I still have questions, and I think they're going to have to win with defense, which still should be pretty good. One of my personal favorite players in college football is Payton Wilson. I'm just going to read off his stats from 11 games last year. 38 tackles that were solo, 44 assists, a total of 82. He had 12 and a half tackles for loss. He had 4.5 sacks. He had a pick. He had 7 pressures, 3 PBUs or 4 PBUs. The guy's just a great football player, and he's back for like a 6th year. To say that he is a savvy and sound middle linebacker, that is saying something. Now, the other 2 linebackers combined to be arguably the best overall linebacker corps in the country. They were certainly top 5 to top 10 by anybody's barometer that has a clue. They lost 2 of those guys. So teams will probably try to scheme against him a little bit, but great players find ways to make big plays. I highly doubt that Payton is going to be falling off very much at all because he's just that good. Teams still have to find a way around him. To that point, a couple of categories, an offensive riser and a defensive riser. The defensive riser, I think, is a really good player anyway. And in Davin Vann, he's a defensive lineman. He's lost some weight, plays defensive end in a 3-man line. He's in the 270s now instead of 290, but he's a guy that can get after it too. And he'll probably go up in sacks, experience. They have some other guys back. They'll be pretty good up front, and they move around and do some different things, which turns Payton loose, etc. And they also find ways to just use their size. They have some pretty good sized defensive linemen. They lost one of their interior guys at nose, which helps them, but they just need to be good up front. Here are a couple stats for you. Run defense, 11th in the nation, only averaged 100.7, or teams only averaged 100.7 yards per game on the ground. That's really good. Scoring, also 11th in the nation. They gave up 19.2. Passing defense, though, because teams sometimes fell behind, this is a little misleading. They were 71st in the nation with 226.2. That's somewhat misleading, and I'll get to that just one moment because of this guy. Aydan White is an All-American candidate. He was honorable mention last year, had 4 picks. He's a 6 foot, 185-pound corner, really good. And they have a couple other guys that have some talent and experience. They might give up some yards. They might. But NC State has proven that they can also take the ball away and be clutch at getting pressure on the quarterback on 3rd downs. When you do those 2 things, you've got a chance. And they've got some key guys back. Again, if you've got Wilson and White back, that's a great start. Now they've got to find another guy somewhere up front or another linebacker or whatever to at least help alleviate the losses of those key players in the secondary and at linebacker. I'm not sure which guy it'll be, but that's college football. Those things take care of themselves. But Dave Doeren's a very good defensive-minded guy. So my offensive riser, I just put a question mark. Like they have so many unknowns. Maybe it's Jordan Houston. Maybe it's another running back. Maybe it's a transfer. I don't know. Maybe even be an offensive lineman that's so dominant. They've had some pretty good linemen in recent years. One went in the first round. They need somebody to step up, though, or they will not reach their goals despite, quite honestly, the schedule that they're playing. Because it's a really good schedule to go against in the ACC. Let's talk about, and this is just me here, the teams they're playing over the last 3 years, the key teams. I wrote down 4. Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, and Miami. The reason I picked those teams is they have the most physical talent. Not always the most attributed to wins and losses, but you got to show up and play at a high level or those teams can beat you on any given day. So I'm just going to start with 2020 and read off the scores and talk a little bit about it. At Clemson in 20, they didn't play. Like that would have been the year they would have played at Clemson. They just got the year off. ACC rotating schedule. Florida State, 38-22. They won. They lost that incredible game to Miami, 41-44, and they got smoked at North Carolina, 21-48. In 21, they hosted Clemson, 27-21. They won that game. It was a really good game. It was a key for Clemson, kind of falling off a little bit. Congrats to not many teams hold Clemson to 21, by the way. Again, Doeren, very good defensive-minded coach. They played well against Florida State. Defense again, 28-14. They came out victorious. Lost another nail-biter to Miami, 30-31. And then North Carolina at home, after getting just bludgeoned the year before, they turned the tables and at least won, 34-30. Last year, Clemson got them. NC State went on the road and went to Death Valley and lost 20-30. They did defeat FSU, though, 19-17 in a really good game, and they did not play Miami, and they won at North Carolina. So the first opportunity against Drake May, they came back and won. That was an overtime game. So really kind of interesting there. The noticeable thing from this is they were competitive, except for that game against North Carolina where they lost by 27 in 2020. They were competitive. They've had like Devin Leary, who's now transferred to Kentucky, was a good quarterback, but even when they didn't have him, like Finley played a lot of last year, et cetera, they've had guys that were pretty successful at getting the ball to where it needs to be in big games. So they're competitive each game. I think that'll continue this year. And Brennan Armstrong's a fifth-year senior quarterback. They're going to have a better year. Again, I don't know if they have enough playmakers to win shootouts at that 35-plus range, kind of like Virginia did. They had some big receivers that were really talented. I'm not convinced that's going to be the case for the Wolfpack. But listen to their schedule. This is the part, and then I'll get into the Miami parts with this specifically. This is crazy to me because they play Notre Dame. They're early in the season, their second game on September 9th. So they'll certainly get a test there. And when they get into conference play, they've got Louisville and Marshall. Marshall's in the middle of the year. It's kind of weird, but that's a quality team. That's where Guidry came from. It's at Miami now. That's a pretty good team. We'll find out what their mental makeup is with that game because not many teams will take them serious. And if you screw around with Marshall, you will get beat. They go to Duke on the 14th of October, but they have all of the following opponents at home. And NC State is a difficult place to play. Their fans truly do get into it. November, they've got Clemson, on October 28th, Miami, November 4th, and then the Tar Heels, November 25th, all at home. Those are big deals to have all three of those at home. And they don't play Florida State. You could make an argument from a physical standpoint. The other teams in the conference, they don't play any of them on the road. And one, they don't play at all. That's ridiculous. I don't know how they got that on the schedule, but that's really interesting. Now, there's also the other point here that's unique. Louisville in all of this is on the 29th. They're a team I bring up in every podcast, it seems like, because they might have a schedule even easier than NC State. It's debatable. But not many people want to circle Louisville on the schedule. They've got them at home on September 29th. If they jack around, that could screw up their whole season. Those three games I mentioned at the end, all at home. You need to win at least two of them, like to win the conference or whatever. But if you lose the Louisville game, you probably need to win all three. That's hard. Even at home, that's very difficult. So they're going to have Duke, October 14th, Clemson, October 28th, Miami, November 4th, UNC, November 25th. So there's a little bit of an opportunity there. The Clemson game, they're going to get some time before they play them. Maybe they catch them at the right time. I don't know. Like Clemson has Notre Dame, etc. I think NC State can catch Clemson at the right time. It's possible. Miami is the week after. That's good for Miami. But again, they got to go on the road. That's a tough way to go. And then they got Carolina. It's all the way at the end. They've got a couple middle of the road teams in between. I think that 9-3 is not out of the question for the Wolfpack. 10-2 is not out of the question. Brennan Armstrong connects again with the day. And I'm not saying they're going to have those same kind of numbers. I believe he threw for 4,449 yards and 31 TDs a couple of years ago. That's not happening. They don't have the same kind of skill guys to make the plays after the catch. But throwing for 3,000 yards and 24 touchdowns and having a pretty good run offense that's, just consistent, and then allowing that good defense to do things again, that's going to be probably a little more likely in what I could see. So how does this play out as it relates to the Miami Hurricanes? Well, if you're a team that has the capabilities of playing with them, that's number one. They do. They got Brennan Armstrong. Miami has the ability to rush the passer. So that's important. I don't think NC State's O-line is going to be great, but at the same time, Miami seems to get to the quarterback in general. But they also have an offense that's going to be better this year, so NC State might have to throw it more. That's something else. Miami should be able to score. That'll force more teams to throw the ball a little bit earlier in the games, most of the time. And I also think that Miami's ability to run the ball, that'll be the key to that game. NC State, again, they gave up 100.7 yards per game on the ground. That's tremendous. They did it in a Power 5 conference, and they did it against teams like that really want to go after you and get downhill. So, I mean, there's some pass happy teams and whatnot, like Virginia tried to be. They were terrible at it. But most of the teams in the ACC still want to establish the run first. It's not quite as pass happy as the Big 12, for instance. They did a great job. Miami needs to run for 125 yards conservatively, probably 150 to win that game. Again, it's on the road. You're probably going to have a false start or something goofy. You're going to have a difficult time getting communication. That place is loud, very loud. You must find a way to make big plays on defense and keep the game in reach early, take the crowd out. And one of the ways you do that is just to run football. Tyler Van Dyke is good, but they're going to have to run downhill. Will they win? I don't know. The one huge advantage I think that Miami has is the game against Clemson the week before. Timing. Win or lose, NC State is going to be playing a game after getting beat up against Clemson. Clemson's going to be physical. You can mark that down, lock, stock, and barrel. That's going to be a physical football game. Those two teams do not like each other. They usually play close games. As I noted, the last two were both very close games. I don't think that's going to be any different this year. The only thing about that with Miami is they can't take that as just a guarantee they're going to win or something. You got to go on the road, and especially if Clemson wins, that'll fire up NC State, especially if there's still a chance for them to win the ACC title. That game could be a must-win situation. They've got to be at least ready, if you will, for an absolute backyard brawl kind of game. So, again, I think NC State is going to be right around there. I'd originally thought they'd be 7-5, 8-4, but when you look at the timing of their games, if they can somehow beat Notre Dame early in the year, and that's definitely not out of the question, that could be a 9-3, 10-2 team. But if they struggle early, like if they get beat by Notre Dame or get beat by Louisville or get beat by Marshall or something, I don't know how the parts are going to work. And you still don't know for sure how much Anae is going to have an impact on him because they don't have the same kind of playmakers he's used to having, but he is a tremendous coordinator. So we'll see. With that being said, please hit that notification bell. Please make sure you like this podcast and share it. And above all else, as I always say, please comment. What do you think about this game? Like where it falls on the schedule, what Miami has to do in regards to running the football. Is it a team, even though they're really good on pass defense with big plays, they do give up yards? Do you think Miami should throw it more? Whatever you want to talk about, I'm curious. Please make sure you give a comment and let me know what you got going on. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.